Welcome to AASHTO Resource Q&A. We're taking time to discuss construction materials testing and inspection with people in the know. From exploring testing problems and solutions to laboratory best practices and quality management, we're covering topics important to you.
Welcome to AASHTO Resource Q&A. I'm Brian Johnson.
And I'm Kim Swanson. And welcome to another episode of AASHTO Resource Q&A. What are we here to talk about today, Brian?
Today, we're going to talk about a development in concrete standards that I don't know that everybody is aware of. And this may take us on a bit of a sidetrack conversation to standards development. So we'll see. This is either going to be really short or way too long. But you'll be able to tell by how much time is on the episode. So don't worry. What I want to talk about is this new full standard. The standard designation is AASHTO R119, 119, and it's a 2024 date on that one. It is the standard practice for grinding the ends of cylindrical concrete specimens. All right, are you with me?
I am with you. I'm confused that it's an R designation though. And why am I confused? I feel like that's not normal. Am I just not remembering things correctly? Because that's also a possibility.
Well, R's and AASHTO are standard practices. So those are things that you do that do not produce a test result.
Gotcha. That's why I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a practice for grinding the ends of the cylinders. And the reason why this standard exists is because we created it. So this is a case where I don't want to, I can't take full credit because there were others involved, but this was my standard that I worked on because I saw a need. You remember our episode on UHPC?
Yes.
Ultra high performance concrete. With ultra high performance concrete, you pretty much have to grind the ends of the cylinders plane to 0.002 inches before you test them for compressive strength. For regular concrete cylinders, you often will use sulfur or gypsum capping or pad caps, but those materials aren't strong enough for ultra high performance concrete. So you use a end grinder. Now, these end grinders are not the same as what a lot of people try to use for typical cylinder grinding, which would be like a handheld grinder or just a kind of regular like wet saw you'd get at Home Depot or something like that, or some other place where you'd buy something like that. So I thought it was good to have a standard so that we could standardize the process and then ultimately make that an option for people in standards like AASHTO T24 and ASTM C31 and C39 and AASHTO R39 and AASHTO R100. So for those of you, and C1856, which that's the UHPC standard. So the idea is that this is kind of like, this needs to get woven into the fabric of all of these standards, in my opinion, so that it is a regular option. So what I did is, originally this was published as a provisional standard in AASHTO. And the provisional process is that it has to get renewed every 2 years or voted on to go to a full standard. Thankfully, there were some of the members of AASHTO in some of the DOTs. I believe Florida and Texas helped out with this more than most because they used the UHPC materials at times, and they contributed to it. So that's why I can't claim full ownership of this standard. It is an AASHTO standard. So what makes an AASHTO standard an AASHTO standard is consensus from the DOTs. So those members helped out, made some really good revisions that made my rough standard a much better standard, as the consensus process does. And now what we have is this full standard that can be used for accreditation purposes and referenced by other standards. So what I did at that point now that this is live, I'm trying to lobby the other committees and subcommittees to consider adding it. So reached out to the various AASHTO technical subcommittees and main committee and the ASTM subcommittees and main committee to get this added. And one other standard that I really want to get this added to is ASTM C1077, because right now it allows for capping use of pad caps, and that's it. But sometimes if somebody is used to working with UHPC all the time and they say, I just want to grind all the ends and be done with it, they would have an option to do that for certification purposes of their technicians and for a required test method to be included in their scope of services. So a lot there with accreditation, certification, standard use. But I want to make people aware that R119 is out there. I know we have people overseas that listen to this at times, and they may not know about the development of this. So I hope you check this standard out. It would be in the 2024 standards volume for AASHTO, and it would also be available anywhere you get standards like ASTM Compass or IHS. They should have that as well. I know Compass does. I don't know about IHS, but I assume at this point they would have it. Anyway,
So,
that's my public service announcement slash promotional message about R119.
so is there a ASTM equivalent to this, or is it just only an AASHTO standard?
Of course, you would ask that question. No, there is not an ASTM equivalent to that. The current agreement between ASTM and AASHTO is that
Mhm.
if there is a new standard developed in one, the other standard development organization will not develop
Mm.
the same standard in the other one. Now, as an AASHTO employee, I probably should have taken it to AASHTO first, but I didn't. I actually did talk to ASTM in a committee meeting because I was in a committee meeting when this, uh, before I fully developed this thing. I said, hey, are you interested in this? Because I think it would make sense to refer to this. And I can't remember which subcommittee meeting I was in, but there was no interest in developing such a standard in ASTM. So I then took it to AASHTO, and that subcommittee was interested in that. So that's where it resides. So there was a discussion. I think if both of them were interested, I probably would have talked to both of the organizations' decision-making people who can have a say in the standard and say, I think this is good for both of them. So it would be nice to have a truly joint standard that could get balloted to both at the same time, and have that be like the guinea pig for trying that kind of balloting. Because I really do, when it comes to the joint standards, it's never really been a joint standard, even if you see AASHTO and ASTM on the same one. What would be truly a joint standard would be one where the memberships of both committees are voting on the same changes to the same standard and are approving this exact same one, but they don't really, it doesn't work that way. I hope that one day it will. It would take a lot of effort and a lot of okay. I don't know how to say this, but in a way that people understand. But sometimes there are processes at the end of the line will dictate what happens at the beginning. We call that the tail wagging the dog in our country, but there's probably a phrase for that in other places as well. But I think that one of the reasons why we would struggle to do that is because the meetings are held at different times. So that's not a great reason from a process perspective to say like we can't do this because of this arbitrarily at one point arbitrarily selected date for meeting
Mhm.
for these activities. But I think that is not the only roadblock in this process, but it would certainly be one of them.
And so, just so on a recap of making sure I understand this, is that the AASHTO R119, right? Is that the right? Did I say that right? Okay. AASHTO R119, you're trying to get, now that it's a real live standard, like it's an official standard,
Yes.
you're trying to get that referenced in other standards, applicable standards, of saying,
Right.
instead of their own, this is how you do it, just like do it like AASHTO R119,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Okay.
And that's kind of the way it goes for practices. They really only have
Mm-hmm.
value if they're used in standard test methods and
Mm-hmm.
other standards as well. And uh, otherwise, it just kind of hangs out there as a practice that nobody's requiring. And I'm not saying they have to require it, but I think at the beginning, if people aren't really sure about it, they could at least have a note or something that says you can also, or you may consider
Mm-hmm.
using this standard uh, for certain circumstance, whatever,
Yeah,
however they want
yeah.
to define it. If
Mm-hmm.
they want
Mm-hmm.
to go light at first,
Yeah.
because these things can take some time, and I'm not saying the standard is perfect. I mean, it's probably like no standard is perfect, so it's going to have revisions, but I think just getting it out there and getting more people using it
Mm-hmm.
is the way to improve it. So we want to make that happen, and I hope people will start checking it out.
So how often will it be revised? Like how often, like you said, no standard's perfect. So how often will people be looking at this at AASHTO, making sure that it is still relevant and useful?
Well, because it's a full standard now, it'll go into the normal routine of it. It has to be updated every so many years, and
Mm,
I should be able to rattle that off, but I can't remember if it's eight
okay.
years. Like in ASTM, it's 8 years.
Okay.
It might be less in AASHTO, it might be six, but I just can't remember right now.
Okay. But it could be sooner if someone found a need and wanted to ballot changes.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
as needed always applies in
Okay.
standards, except well in ASTM and AASHTO at least. Like
Hmm.
some standards, they don't want to do it too often
Yeah.
because it's too disruptive. Like I would say like R18 is a good example of a standard that you don't want to update all the time
Hmm.
because there are all these systems that are kind of tied to how that document is laid out.
Hmm.
So you don't want to constantly disrupt people unless it's important. So we had some small changes take place, but the big ballot is going to be coming out here soon. But again, standards development can be a slow process. So I don't, even if everything goes well with that one, it'll be 2 years before that people see those changes in reality.
All right. And is AASHTO R119 available for the AASHTO accreditation programs? Can laboratories be accredited for that starting now or not yet?
Yeah, it's available for inclusion in the AASHTO accreditation program. All they have to do is request to have it included in the CCRL inspection,
Hmm.
and they can add it to their program and start accrediting for it. But and we can start accrediting for it, but that's not nobody's going to want it until it's
It's required.
required or referred to and some of the other standards that they are required to be accredited for.
That makes sense. So, anything else about this? Because I feel like we are right on the cusp of this being its own episode. We were going back and forth. So, is there anything else that you want to talk about this, and then we can wrap up this discussion?
I don't think there's anything else to
Okay.
throw in here. I mainly want just people to be aware of this standard, and we can make this a mini episode. I think that
Hmm.
that probably is fine because we dragged this conversation out longer than I had expected. Uh, and which, this happens. I I
It
often
definitely does.
I often will go on too long about something. I hope I didn't, though. I hope that there was some useful information here for people, even though I feel like I may have gone on too long.
Well, I hope we didn't go on too long and that our listeners are still listening, but I did want to put a plug in. We are gearing up for the 2025 AASHTO Resource Technical Exchange as at the time of this recording. It will be March 17th through the 20th in Bellevue, Washington, again in 2025. So if you've never been to a technical exchange, or you may hear us refer to it as TechX, if you've never attended, this is a great opportunity for you to get involved and expand your network and really explore topics that will really help you improve your professional life. I'm going to say that's a thing.
I would agree. I would agree. I think one of the advantages of technical exchange is all the people that you meet, and that you are building your network at these events, including people who provide services you use all the time. So you may talk to multiple calibration agencies, equipment suppliers, other, maybe subcontractors that you end up using for testing. All sorts of opportunities await when you attend TechX.
Yes, and you can find more information about TechX at ashtoresource.org/events. Well, thanks for taking time to discuss AASHTO R119 today, Brian.
I am very happy to do it. As I said, I wanted to get the word out about this standard, so hopefully we were successful.
And if you have questions about the standard, you can reach out to Brian or catch him at TechX, because I'm sure he will be there.
I will be there, and I'm also going to be on the mid-year meetings for the comp meetings, talking about this at the relevant ones. And I'm going to be at the ASTM meeting in December in Orlando, also pushing this standard. And I guess I should mention, I am pushing this standard, but not because I don't like stand to gain anything by this, other than the fact that I think it would be really useful for people to have it. And other than this recording, and people who have worked on this with me, they'll have no idea that I had anything to do with it. And that's totally fine. I almost didn't even mention my involvement in it, but you might be wondering like why I care so much about it is because I put a lot of effort into it. Anyway, that's my soft sales pitch, I guess, on that. I'm
Was
not
it soft?
there's
Was
a reason
it soft?
there's a reason that I'm not in business. I would be a horrible business person.
I'm gonna not comment on that. But
Okay.
thanks for joining us, and see you next time.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks for listening to AASHTO Resource Q&A. If you'd like to be a guest or just submit a question, send us an email at podcast@ashtoresource.org or call Brian at 240-436-4820. For other news and related content, check out AASHTO Resource's social media accounts or go to ashtoresource.org.